Okay. Just to remind everyone, we have a budget workshop on December 7th. Two budget workshops there on December 16th and December 21st at 7 o'clock. So that we'll discuss that on Tuesday. Okay, Kim, you want to start us off?
I do. Good evening.
How you
I am
doing?
here to present the Pupil Services Department budget, which or on the diagnosed on the autism spectrum is higher than the state average. The state average for identified children on the autism spectrum is 5.3%. Here in Londonderry, of our identified population, 8.9% have an autism spectrum disorder. The state average for children with emotional and behavioral disorders is 7.8%. Here in Londonderry, it's 10.5%. Those figures are in the trends and projections in my summary for you. Our specific learning disabilities population continues to decline. It's now at 37%, which is 305 students. A few years ago, we were solidly in the 40% range. While overall district enrollment's going down, there's another factor that's impacting our LD numbers. That is our RTI program, Response to Intervention. Response to intervention is a targeted, measurable intervention geared at closing gaps, and it results in less children going through the referral, evaluation, and becoming identified as a child with a specific learning disability. In fact, RTI is woven into the fabric of IDEA. It's federally mandated that states consider the RTI process as part of and prior to the identification of children with specific learning disabilities. As of November, we had 91 elementary students receiving RTI services through our special education staff. The medical needs of our students continues to become more significant. 19% of our identified population, or 157 students, are living with complex, acute medical diagnoses, which require specialized instruction. The instructional and the therapeutic needs, as well as the augmentative supports that are required to educate these students, have an impact district-wide. They have a fiscal impact, they have an impact on staffing. Currently, 29 of our students require daily nursing care. A final highlight from the trends and projections that I'd like to bring to your attention is the student population who matriculate through their 21st birthday. In November, you watched a video depicting one strand of our self-contained programming. We offer self-contained programming at the pre-K through 12th grade level for children with cognitive disabilities, on the autism spectrum, and with emotional disabilities. In fact, 11% of the identified population at Londonderry High School right now will stay through their 21st birthday. Many students are at Londonderry High School 6 or 7 years. As part of my budget request, I'm proposing to reallocate one teacher from the ACT program, which currently has 4 teachers, to a new program at Londonderry High School, the Friends 4 program. As has been in our strategic plan the last couple of years and previewed in prior budget requests, fiscal year 2012 will be the first year that this population of our friends will hit Londonderry High School. The program will be an expansion of the Moose Hill district-wide program at Matthew Thornton and Friends 3 program at the middle school for our autistic population requiring intensive, self-contained programming to meet their educational needs. As I said, the first group of friends will be transitioning to the high school throughout the next school year. In addition, to meet the needs of our population that does stay through their 21st birthday, I've also requested an increase in my district-wide professional service budget line. This is outlined in my budget request as well as in the budget analysis that you have in your packet. This increase will allow us to continue to contract with an outside vendor, Work Opportunities, supporting our 19 and 20-year-old population in reaching the transitional goals in their IEP around their community and vocational education needs. These services are a mandate from both federal and state laws governing IDEA. We compared the fiscal impact of using a vendor to doing the program in district or in-house. And as detailed in my budget request on page 447, the $77,000 increase I am requesting would actually yield a cost savings of $30,000 if we were to do the program in-house. This cost savings is directly related to the fact that I would not be able to reallocate one of our ACT teachers because I would need that position to run the community and vocational education component of ACT, and would need to be requesting a Friends 4 teacher, and that through Work Opportunities and the contract that we have, all transportation costs are included. That would not be the case were we to provide this service in-house. And these programs and sites that our vendor takes our children to expand far beyond Londonderry. And so the cost of providing transportation to Bedford, Manchester, Goffstown would be significant, as the children, the closer they get to their 21st birthday, often spend 5 days a week out at these sites. In addition, I am recommending the elimination of 4 special education assistant positions from Londonderry High School. The vendor provides support staffing at all of the off-site locations, and in addition, the 3 remaining ACT teachers would remain in-house, working with the population not off-site, as well as our younger ACT students, and focusing on the in-district programming that they are developing for our 16 to 19-year-olds. They have spent the last 2 years enhancing and developing programs for the 16 and 19-year-old population of these students, where they are working throughout Londonderry. They are visiting community and vocational sites such as the post office, and having in-district jobs both throughout the high school, the district office, and at Matthew Thornton. We have expanded this mandated transition service beyond the ACT program as well. Students in our FLEX program who require this level of intense transition service are also using our outside vendor. I've done projective enrollments for our cognitively impaired and our autistic populations through fiscal year 2026, in case any of you are still going to be around, and I can guarantee that the needs for these programs are still there for the foreseeable future. We will be averaging, after our bubble population in ACT matriculates through 2012, we'll be averaging a minimum of 10 to 12 students in both of those programs at Londonderry High. Cost for the outside vendor will also decrease with enrollment, as we do have that bubble population that I've talked to the board about before, currently at the high school, and that bubble population will be aging out through 2012. And then that population shrinks, and therefore the outside vendor cost would decrease. And speaking of cost savings, on page 415 to 418 in your budget book, you have a breakdown of the cost savings of our in-district special education programs. Including fiscal year 12, these programs have yielded a cost savings of over $30 million. Next year alone, we will save the Londonderry taxpayers $7.1 million through our in-district programs for children with significant disabilities. The fiscal impact of providing special education services is outstanding, but even more important is the ability to allow these children to be educated in their public schools with their peers, their friends, their brothers, and their sisters. On page 419 and 420, I've outlined our transportation costs. We have a multi-year contract with Provider Enterprise. As I outlined in the packet, next year will be our final year of a 5-year contract. We, at that point, have a 2-year good faith negotiation clause in the contract, which we will begin going through that process in the summer with provider, and at that point also go out for proposals for other transportation companies, and I'll be bringing a new proposal to the board sometime during the next school year. We provide transportation to over 100 in-district students during the school year and over 200 students during the summer for our extended school year program, as well as for our out-of-district students. There is a $7,657 increase in this line due to contractual increases for fiscal year 12. We are budgeting $761,570 for transportation costs in FY12. You will note that we did budget for 8 monitors and only 7 buses. We used the bus that Peter contracts for the Victory and runs for some of our in-district runs for the district-wide programs, as they have to go much further than just the neighborhood schools, and for our LEAP runs as our LEAP population continues to grow. Our students require a monitor on the bus. So while we are able to piggyback and use the bus that Peter contracts with, we do need to ensure that there is a monitor for those students on that bus. Our most volatile account is our private tuition line for out-of-district placements. On page 421 and 422, you can see that we are budgeting for 18 students at $1,300,383. It's an increase of $38,922 from the current year budget. The increase is due to projected tuition increases at the out-of-district placements. We continue to be proactive and creative, using our current staffing to meet the needs of our population. On page 441 to 445, I've shown the reallocation of our assistants, teachers, and therapists based on student needs. We are looking at reallocating 42 daily hours, or 8 assistants, following students as they matriculate to new buildings. So as students with a one-on-one assistant leave the kindergarten, that assistant would follow them to the elementary school. As I have mentioned, I'm looking to reallocate 1 ACT teacher for the Friends 4 program, leaving 3 ACT teachers, which I believe is an appropriate staffing level based on the enrollment and the use of our outside vendor for the transition service. And also a .25 speech and language pathologist from North Elementary School to help with the population at the middle school requiring speech and language services. Through budget development discussions with the superintendent, $18,422 worth of equipment requests necessary to support the needs of our educationally disabled population was removed from the fiscal year 12 general fund budget. I will be coming back to ask board approval to use our money to purchase the equipment needed for those students for their programs. I'm fortunate enough to be able to lead an incredible group of dedicated staff who work tirelessly on behalf of Londonderry's children with disabilities. From our assistants, our talented teachers, therapists, and knowledgeable administrators, we offer quality educational services, allowing these students to meaningfully benefit from their individualized education programs. As you've already heard from Nate, the Pupil Service Department is undergoing a reorganization. I am very confident in the administrators behind me, in our elementary assistant principals, and in our special education staff. I believe our new organizational structure will allow for the continuation of exceptional service delivery that Londonderry is known for. And I'd be happy to take questions.
Kim, I'll start off. You said 14.1% of our population is special education.
14.4.
14.4. What is the state average?
I don't have that with me. We hover around the national average. I can look up New Hampshire. It's in here somewhere, I believe, but.
Okay. Let me ask you another question. Someone listening might say, they're taking a teacher and moving it there and they can possibly eliminate it because they don't need it anymore. What would happen to those, how many of those friends, students are moving up, and what would we do with those students if we didn't allocate that teacher?
We have 3 friends, 3 students that will be transitioning to the high school. Their needs are at such an intense level that their entire program is direct teaching. They need one-on-one instruction. If I did not have a dedicated teacher available for that program, I would be looking to place those children out of district. The average tuition cost for each of those students is about $80,000.
Could Kim describe what the Friends For program is? I know we use a lot of acronyms and names in-house, and just sometimes it's good to step back and spell out what it is.
Absolutely. Our Friends 1, 2, 3, and 4 programs are designed to meet the needs of our significantly autistic population. These are students who have very limited communication skills. They are often completely nonverbal and communicate through augmentative communication devices. They require one-on-one support for all their daily living skills, for safety. Their programs focus on building communication skills, regulating their behavior, and being able to sensorily handle their environment.
Thank you.
Kim, can you please explain why children are spending 6 years in the high school and being here till 21?
IDEA, the federal law that governs special education, mandates that children with a disability receive services starting at age 3 through 21 unless they receive a regular high school diploma or refuse services prior. So these students that are staying through 21, the end of their Londonderry school career is really focused on preparing them to be able to live as independently as possible, work in a vocational site, sheltered work environment, and participate in a recreation and leisure program in the community that allows them to have a fulfilled life as an adult. They will not receive any adult support services, fiscally or any other, until they turn 21. So often families, a child might feel like they're ready, they're itching to get out at 19, but there'd be a 2-year gap before any adult service would pick them up. And so those last couple of years are crucial, both in a developmental phase for the children as they transition to adult life, but also because there are no additional services available to them.
Thank you. George?
Kim, you had mentioned earlier that some of the students that we've got that are identified within the, I believe you call it the autism spectrum, is higher than the state average. And this may be an unfair question, but where's our budget in relation to those programs and those kids in the state average? It's obvious that it doesn't take a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist to figure out that we've got people moving into this community specifically for those. That's the only conclusion I can draw from those numbers. I'm just curious to see where we rate. I suspect it's either equal to or lower than the money that the rest of these places are putting into it, but.
Right, I don't have the figures. It would be an
figured you
interesting comparison.
Yeah.
Because I know that a lot of our districts across the state, and especially smaller ones who don't have the population that we do, have to send their children out of district at a higher expense. It is a safe assumption. I get a lot of phone calls asking me about our programs. People that are looking to move, don't know where they're moving to, but have heard about Londonderry. And
Yeah, I mean, it's statistically, I can look at it and say that's a safe conclusion, either that or we've got something in the groundwater or ground that's causing the issue. And the other question just went right out of my head. That's what happens to get to be my age. It just flew right out, and when it comes up again, I'll remember and I'll ask.
Steve?
At least you're not on national television.
No, just World
Three
Wide
people in the
Web.
audience, and the sad part is they'll see it over and over and over and over again.
I can explain that, executive functioning skills. Around age,
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
This would be Friends 5.
I actually remember. I remember now. Do you mind?
It's called the Elder 50 program.
Wow, talk about senior moments. Thanks. What I was going to ask you is the opportunity inside of each of these programs to have students tuition in. Do we still have those opportunities?
we absolutely do. We currently have a tuitioned-in student in our elementary program from a neighboring community. I've gotten a couple of calls this year asking about our self-contained program at the high school, our STEPS program for our emotional and behavioral disordered population. And we have had many times where we've looked at children, if we feel like there's a right fit and we're not worried about our own population sealing out in that program, then we take in tuition students.
So in addition to that, whatever the number was, $30 million in savings, it's also a revenue generator.
It is, yep. This year, about $45,000.
Strategically, that's where we want to be. So thank you.
You talked about some percentages in the beginning, not to focus in on them, but a number of the percentages seem to be higher. You're comparing us to the state average or the national average, and we seem to be higher. And I'm wondering if some of that isn't simply because we're such a student-rich community. In other words, we have 23% of our population that go to the school system. So are we higher because, and we hear anecdotally people want to move here for our schools, in the band program, and for our special education program. Are the percentages that way, have we normalized them to how student-rich we are? And I don't need an answer, but I think that that's something that would be good to have available to the press and to tell people so that we're not misleading anyone.
It's still a statistical average. It's still a percentage of the students in the cohort, in the entire population, so it would definitely normalize. Or at least statistically it would.
You brought up a $7 million in savings next year.
Right.
So that's not any, because we do talk of cost avoidance and cumulative savings. So is that $7 million just what we will save next year because of the in-house programs?
Yes,
Okay.
that is net savings,
So that's real money
real money,
for just next year?
correct.
Okay.
Kim, can you expand on that a little bit? If we didn't have the in-house programs, I'm keep hitting on the same thing, what would you have to do?
If we didn't have the in-house programming and the appropriate staffing levels for them, we would be looking at sending these children out of district. We would not be able to meet their educational needs here in Londonderry. I would be looking to tuition them to private schools, both in New Hampshire and in Massachusetts, which come with a hefty tuition bill on top of transportation costs to get them there.
Thank you. John?
Kim, couple of questions. You talked about the tuition, the out-of-district students, right? And it's at 1.3 million, which comes out to be roughly 72.2 thousand per student. So that's roughly 7x what it currently costs us for what I would consider the rest of our student body per student. Can you explain that a little bit? And, only because if you do the math out on it, it just seems like a very high number, and why is it that way, and why do we do out-of-district and so forth?
We do out-of-district placements when, as an educational team, we have felt like we have tried and used all of the resources we have here in district and are still unable to meet the educational needs presented by the child with a disability. And/or we are also obligated to continue to educate a child with a disability if they have worn out their welcome in any of our schools due to disciplinary infractions. So if you are a child on an IEP and have been or would be expelled from any of our schools, we are obligated to continue to educate you.
So that kind of leads into the next question I had, which is, if we have to do out of district tuition, why are we paying for it? Okay, so you know, if we have why is the burden not in on the student's parents or the family or what have you? Because it's a legitimate question if you look at it from a taxpayer perspective, right?
Absolutely.
And why is it that we're paying for that out of district to begin with?
IDEA mandates that any child identified as a child with a disability receive what we love acronyms, FAPE, a free and appropriate public education. The key word there being free. So when they are no longer able to attend their neighborhood public school, whether it's because their needs are such at a level of intensity that we cannot meet them, or because of disciplinary infractions, we continue to be mandated by federal and state law to provide that education and therefore pay for it.
So it's really an obligation that we have as a town, okay.
And in terms of the tuition rate,
Right.
in-district tuition rates are set by the Department of Education, and it's an extraordinarily complicated formula that takes in all of the costs that the private school has to run their program, prorated by the capacity of students that they are allowed to have in the school, again, set by the Department of Ed. So that's where the tuition rates come from. Massachusetts is also the same. Massachusetts sets those rates, but
So we can't shop it, is really what you're saying, right? So-
in terms of shopping it, we shop placements in terms of looking at what's most appropriate for the child,
Right.
but there's no haggling over the tuition rate.
Right, that's kind of set.
It is, and often when you go to a private school, all of the ancillary services like occupational therapy, speech and language are a la carte.
Okay. We've been talking a lot about federal monies and so forth, and with everything going on with the Fed, what do you see looking out, into, would you go up to 16?
No, 2026.
26, excuse me. What do you see as far as the Fed monies? Are we going to be losing some federal help there? And when do we expect impacts like that to happen?
I do anticipate the IDEA grant, our typical IDEA grant that we get annually, to remain fairly stable. There hasn't been a lot of talk about reducing that. They've never come close to paying the 40% that they said that they would be paying, the federal government would be paying to help offset the cost of IDEA. We get something closer to 12%.
Okay.
But I anticipate that revenue stream to remain fairly stable. However, our state revenue stream, which is our catastrophic aid, and we get that a year after the fact, we've spent the money and we get that the following year, that pie is getting much, much, much smaller. And the Department of Ed is becoming extremely stringent in what they're allowing for costs. And I anticipate that revenue source in the next few years to become harder and harder to get a piece of that pie.
And so obviously you're calculating that into your numbers.
Yeah. Kim, could you explain to the public how catastrophic aid is calculated for us?
Yes. Catastrophic aid is calculated at any costs for a child with a disability educational program. Direct costs is the legal reference that are 3.5 times greater than the state average. So you take the state average tuition, 3.5 times that amount. Any costs beyond that are then eligible for reimbursement. And for this year, that was $42,000, I think 500 and change. And so for our in-district and out-of-district students whose program costs greater than that amount, we have to submit invoices, and we get a portion of that back reimbursed to us. The state government gives us kind of a target of what to expect. Over the years, that target's gotten smaller and smaller. For this fiscal year, which means last year's expenditures, they told us to expect around 69% of what we would be eligible for.
One final question. Again, relative, I know we talked a little bit about the state and how our numbers are relative to the state. How are we relative to the other towns that are around us? I ask this question to a lot of people. What are they doing with their programs, and what are you seeing? I'm sure you talk amongst yourselves. How do we rank relative to them and the programs that they provide versus the programs we provide?
We have more intensive in-district programs than our neighbors. Derry is just this year putting into their general fund elementary autism programs. They had been outplacing most of their population. Derry does have in-district programming for their emotional and behaviorally disordered population. Salem has some in-district programming. They have some district-wide at one of their elementary schools. They do not have the level of intensity that Londonderry does. And, I mean, for size, those are two that are pretty easy to compare to. Merrimack, which is similar in size, has some in-district programs. The state law that governs special education, RSA 186C, was added to about a year ago, and there was incentives put into 186C for districts to really begin to build in-district programming and not have to send children out of district just because they didn't have the staffing or the programming for those children. So more and more districts are looking at bringing in programs in-house.
So the logical assumption you could make there is that they're spending large amounts of money to the tune of something larger than that $1.3 million.
I can absolutely guarantee you that our neighboring communities' out-of-district tuition lines are much higher than Londonderry's.
Thank you.
First off, Kim, excellent presentation. I just wanted to say that. Are we more generous than other towns in terms of the out-of-district placements we do make? Is it easier to get Londonderry to pay for a student to go to Crotched Mountain or something like that than it might be in another town?
No, it is not. It would be unethical of me or any of our staff at a team meeting to look for the easy way out. We are legally mandated to look at the least restrictive environment, which starts in the regular education inclusionary class. A continuum that we literally have to look through, and out of district is at the very end of that. So to jump from A to M or A to Z would be inappropriate. And so we really, as an IEP team, which includes parents, look at all of the options and try all of the options prior to making that determination.
So then it probably wouldn't be valid, or true rather, to suspect that people might move to Londonderry because of the leniency that we have in placing kids in distant schools.
No, and to that point, John, I can tell you I received a phone call about a month ago from a family considering looking at Londonderry. Their child was currently outplaced, and in my general conversation with them, I said we'd be starting to look at our in-district programs. That's where we start. We have the programs here. We want to educate our kids in our neighborhood schools, and that would be the beginning point of our conversation.
That leads to the second point, and this is probably rhetorical. I don't have an answer to it. I don't expect anybody would. But there is always the question of whether the quality of our special ed programs, like the quality of our general ed programs, draw students or families to come to Londonderry. But I guess the alternative is, even if we could prove that that was happening, what can we do about it? I mean, would the solution be to ratchet down the quality of programs that we have here already so that they don't attract new students? I mean, I know that's not the answer, but I can't think of another one.
obviously, there's a fiscal impact when people look to move for good programming, but I'm not easy to please, and I'm very proud of our programming. And if a byproduct of that is that people are drawn to Londonderry, that's a byproduct of it that's out of my control, but I would never look to decrease the quality of what we offer.
Okay, thank you.
I got just one other thing. This is for the public. On the school board, we often go into our 91A sessions and we head off to the back room, and a lot of our responsibilities occur back there. And this issue is often that. And I'd just like to bring up a extremely hypothetical case to illustrate it and to illustrate the responsibilities that we have and the costs that we have. And I'm going to compare regular education students to special education students. This is not a case that's occurred, nor do I expect it to occur, so kids don't do what I'm going to say.
Oh, God.
But let's say we have student A, Nate, and student A is a regular education student who sets off a smoke bomb in the school, and student A then gets into a fight with one of the assistant principals trying to mitigate the situation. What's likely to happen to student A, who happens to be 15 years old?
Two things would probably happen. That student would either wind up with a long-term suspension in excess of 20 days or half a year or 180 days, or, depending on which assistant principal he picked on, could wind up being expelled. If in fact that was the case with a regular ed student, I think I understand where you're going with this. The school, once that disciplinary action is taken, the school district has no obligation legally to provide any educational services or programs for that child.
And would the student be able to go to any other school in the state of New Hampshire?
They,
Public?
public school, if they were expelled, the answer is no.
Okay.
If it's long-term suspension and they move to another community, that school might accept them after, but an expulsion in the state of New Hampshire means that you cannot attend another school in the state of New Hampshire.
So at age 15, our responsibility is over for that student.
That's correct.
Student B is in the school, and they happen to be a student that's receiving pupil services. To decode that for those of us that have been in the system longer, that would be a special education student. Student B does exactly the same thing, but they have an IEP and they're a special education student. What would, and they're the same age 15, what would happen to them?
We are not obligated to do anything for the first 10 days of a suspension. Once we hit day 11, for whatever the infraction was, then certain protections under IDEA kick in. If we hit day 11, we have to hold what's called a manifestation determination, where as a team, which includes the child's parents and the child, depending on their age, and determine if whether or not their disability was a factor in whatever behavioral infraction they had. Regardless of the outcome of that, however, we are still obligated to ensure that they not only receive an education, but that it is of no cost to the family.
And if they were a violent student and it was safer for them to be off campus, till what age would we have to pay a private institution to educate them?
Until they either received a regular high school diploma or turned 21. And to clarify, many of our students opt very appropriately, for a GED so they can move on and get on with the next phase of their life. However, that does not relieve the obligation of the school district to educate that child. So should a child receive their GED at age 19 and then decide they want to come back for another year of transitional programming, we are obligated to provide that.
So what I was trying to illustrate here is we had two students, one in the special education program or pupil services, and one in the regular education track. And I wanted to illustrate a very different expense situation that the school district could run into, or does run into. Not that we could run into, because we do. And it's just one explanation on why the special education budget is where it is. I think it's important, without knowing the names of student A or student B, or situations that may be occurring, that it's important for people to understand that those are costs that we, the court, will mandate and that we have to pay. Thank you.
Kim, two questions. You had mentioned students are placed out because of discipline. Can you expand on that, what you mean by discipline? Because we think of discipline in one term. That's not what's happening in the special ed world.
By that I mean, when a child breaks the code of conduct at any of our schools, and the resulting actions are either a suspension and/or they would be up for expulsion, and therefore it's not an option for them to return to that school, then we have to look for an out-of-district placement.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I don't know if you have the answer or Nate does. Do we have any out-of-court placements that the district is paying for?
We have 2 right now.
Okay, and this goes back to the discussion we had with our legislatures, where the courts, with the limited funds they have, are now in their rulings mandating that the school districts pay for the out-of-district placements. So there's another cost that the county or the state is transporting to us that's virtually invisible. It's not showing up on a line item of a reduction, but they are taking costs. And do you know by any chance what those costs are?
$220-something a day at one of the placements.
One of the placements.
Correct.
And is that a full year? Is that 365 or 180, or how does that work?
It depends on how long they're placed there. Those kind of accounts often tap into our temporary service line, which is why it's often overspent, because we can't anticipate them, nor do we know how long to anticipate them. If the child is a child who would receive extended school year programming, then yes, we continue to be billed throughout the summer. Interestingly, though, to go on your point, Ron, that also includes some regular education students when they are hospitalized, and also special education students when they are incarcerated. Right. We continue to be obligated to pay for their educational service.
So,
Does anybody else get the feeling the whole system is just pancaking?
I just wanted to make sure that we brought out those points. Is there anything else from the board before I turn it over? Budget Committee. Lisa?
Yeah, hi. I was very interested in that $7 million figure savings. I wondered if you could break that down for us a little.
Absolutely. If you turn to page 216 in your budget book, you'll see the 7-year overview of that broken down. It's broken down by program. I take the actual enrollment in that program in the year that I'm figuring out, and I look at what out-of-district placements would I be looking to send each individual child.
What was the page again?
Kim, it's 460.
416, sorry. The one.
The whole budget committee has indeed passed the
Right.
test. Very
I knew
good.
you'd be asking.
That was my message to the reps.
So each tuition line that I'd be paying for that student, I tally those up and I look at transportation costs. I will tell you that the transportation costs are conservative. I went on the assumption that I would be sending like 6 or 8 of my students to the same school and therefore could put them on the same bus, which is not usually the reality. But I went with that conservative number for transportation. Then I deduct the entire cost of our in-district staffing, our teachers and our support staff, the assistants. I take their full cost deduct that from the tuition and the transportation to come up with our net savings for each program and each child currently enrolled in the program.
It's an impressive number. Thank you.
Yep.
Todd?
Yes, on the overall budget, the increase, and I'm just kind of looking at page 450, for those of you who want to take a look. Under, two questions, under psychological counseling, at the line just below that.
Yep.
Is an increase, it looks like from last year's budget to this year's budget, I think you touched on it.
Yep.
And what was the major driver for that, and how confident are you in the need for that much of an increase?
I'm 100% confident. When I was doing my 2026 projections, I took our current population who would be accessing that outside vendor for transitional service, and I took them all the way out through their 21st birthday, all the way out to 2018, which is how I also know that that will decrease. So I'm 100% confident in needing the service and the cost for it.
There you go.
John?
It's not a budget question, Kim, but I'm just intrigued by that hypothetical that Steve gave. If you have a child that's receiving pupil services, he pulls a knife on another student, you can't expel that student?
We can expel that student, and in fact, there are 3 reasons why we can change a placement without parental consent. If that child causes serious bodily harm, that would be one of those. However, with the expulsion, we must still place them somewhere to be educated and pay for that.
I was just, and that's what I thought as an answer. I just thought
Yep.
the public safety, the safety of the students
Correct.
obviously trumps the IDA, I would think.
Correct.
But we still have to pay for them.
Right,
And we
right.
still have to place them.
Right, no, I.
Yeah.
Presumably in a place that's going to have better ability to manage the issues.
Yes, and keep people safe.
Yeah.
So when Nate said that you expel somebody, we have no further obligation. We can expel them from our system, just not from the roles of
In,
obligation.
in New Hampshire, expulsion basically means you are no longer allowed to attend school on infinitum, all right? Each year, somebody can apply to come back if they want. Suspension has a finite period of time to it, 10 days, 20 days. When Jay was in school, he was suspended for 45 days, I think he told me once. When we are in a position where we're put in a position where we have to expel a special ed student, we expel them from, in a sense, our property.
Right.
And even if their parents moved to another community, they couldn't attend, quote-unquote, that public school. However, it does not obviate us from the responsibility under IDEA and the state statutes to provide a free and appropriate education. So the only option at that point then becomes a private placement, for lack of a better term. So even though the student is, quote-unquote, expelled from our premises in this case, we are still responsible for providing that education. In some cases, that's $70,000, $80,000 a year, if not more, and you include transportation in it. And as Kim has clearly said, up until they're 21 or they receive a diploma at another facility.
Does that require there be a determination that the disability is tied to the misconduct at issue?
I'll get to the fine points. In that case, it does not matter whether or not the behavior was a manifestation of that student's disability. All right? In other words, if the youngster did something wrong as a result of their disability, or did something wrong that was not a result of the disability, it's a moot point if that child is going to be expelled or the suspension is more than 10 days. You still have to provide programming. Where it can become interesting from a disciplinary point of view is on a short-term suspension. or something that could be 20 days, let's say, which is a shorter term, if it is a manifestation of that child's disability, there are different actions that we have to take based on the fact that it was a manifestation of that youngster's disability. So let me give you something really simple, and it's really easy. Let's say we have a youngster who is developmentally disabled and walking down the hallway, and because of that developmental disability cannot understand the consequences of pulling a fire alarm and evacuating the entire high school. Now, if that was a regular ed student, out you go. If it's a situation like that, we'd say, you shouldn't do that, and we're gonna have to explain why, or work with that child, or in some cases, make sure the aide walks between the child and the wall and does not allow the child to get near the fire alarm, right? Whereas you could have a different situation where a youngster was coded, walked down the high school hallway, and for giggles, pulled the fire alarm. That action was not a manifestation of their disability. That was just a manifestation of being stupid. Therefore, we would take a certain action different than the one we had taken previously for the other youngster I described.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the Budget Committee? Kim, I'm going to ask you one more question. Londonderry only transports their special ed students in their buses and doesn't just uses Londonderry students on their buses or provider?
For our out-of-district children?
Out-of-district place?
No, not necessarily. If I can get a lower rate by sharing that bus with a Derry going up to Concord, then we have a ride-share option which lowers our costs.
So we share it, and that's another way that you're trying to save money is by sharing the rides to, if Pratchett Mountain, if Derry had a student there, we would
Correct.
probably share that bus there and share the cost of the bus.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions from the Budget Committee? Back to the board? The public? Reed? Okay. Come on up.
How did you happen to pick me?
Well, if I look in the audience, you're in.
Oh, I am the audience?
You're the only public.
Am I the only audience? I can't
You are the only,
find
you are the only public.
You're it.
it. Oh, I see. Okay.
So they're all gonna blame me now for saying we should go to the public. Yeah, you said something. We don't expect that.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm curious, you said Fed's giving you 12%.
Correct.
Thank you. Was it, and it's going up to 40, correct?
No, they promised
That's what,
40.
it's going up to 40. That's what they promised, yeah. Okay, was it 10 last year, and 9.5? In other words, has it been going up to 12, or has it been 12 all the time?
It's been 12. It has not gone up.
Your tax dollars at rest.
Can't you write a letter to the congressman? No, I mean, it seems to me it should go up even a little bit every year. And that's what one of my interviews with the possible president was a few years ago. He said, it'll go up like, it may not go up like this, but it'll go up like this. And I said, okay, thank you. But it hasn't, has it?
No, and for full disclosure, the ARA money that we were allowed for last year and this year doubled our amount. So one could argue we got 24%, but that was one moment in time and not anticipated to be repeated.
But let's go back on the ARA money. What could it not do?
It cannot supplant, so it can only be used to buy unanticipated or additional services.
So it could not be used to pay for 4 teachers that we had on staff.
No.
About 4 or 5 years ago, we did a quick and dirty analysis of what we were getting for IDEA money and what we should have been getting for IDEA money. And it came to, at that point in time, we were being shorted, if you want to call it that, $1 million a year.
Yes.
Million here, a million there.
Kim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It's all the same.
Thank you, Kim.
Stay off that fire.
Oh, I'm guarding it
Yeah,
against
stay off
Peter.
That's why you're over there, though.
It's a little cold for a fire drill.
Yes, absolutely.
All the trees that are and
Good evening. My curriculum budget starts on page 463 and goes to 516, but I was able to reduce that to 3 pages plus tonight's presentation. Last year's budget for fiscal 2011 was $461,054. This year, we're proposing for 2012, $394,924, which is a reduction of $66,130 or 14%. The major 2 reasons for that reduction are, one, simply the economics. When you're looking at $66,000, you're looking at a teacher, and a teacher is much more valuable in the relationship business that we're in than a simple textbook, because the teacher makes the textbook come alive. The second area is, for those of you who aren't aware, the federal government is looking at new Common Core standards. Those Common Core standards are still being dissected, and those standards will probably have a major impact on textbooks. So for the next few years, we need to be very prudent at what we look at purchasing if we purchase anything district-wide, because they will be changing rapidly to meet the new core standards if they are passed. I broke my budget down into a few sections. The first one was the improvement of instruction. That portion represents 78% of my budget, or $308,854. Of the $308,854, $295,000 of that is contractual. In our teacher contract, administrative contracts, we provide money for professional development. If a teacher takes workshops or goes to different conferences, they are reimbursed by contract $1,500 or what they spend that given year. It may be $1,500 that given year, it may be less. If a teacher is in a master's program taking graduate courses, we reimburse them $2,250 by contract. The way that's broken down at the elementary level, we spend $125,000, which is level funded and has been for the last few years, and we are spending that amount. At the middle school, I actually increased the line item from $60,000 to $70,000, simply because over the last 3 years, we have spent, on average, $69,785.47. The same was the case at the high school, where I increased it by $10,000 as well, because our 3-year average is $89,232.28. My concern is, as we continue to contract the budget, this is a contractual obligation. We have, to give you an example, last year, teachers, through coursework and conferences, spent $312,700. So that line does get overdrawn because professional development is one of the key reasons for our success in the district. An area that doesn't actually come in my budget line because they are salaries is summer curriculum work. Summer curriculum work, if you were looking for the salary accounts where it is on page 390. Summer work is kind of almost our research and development. When we buy a new textbook, or we make changes, or we are looking to do competencies or something like that at the high school, teachers are compensated to come in and do that curriculum work. They're compensated $150 a day for a 6-hour day. It is probably one of the best benefits we have as far as the curriculum that we give back to students. What teachers accomplish in the summer is very, very impressive. So we are proposing a reduction in that line of $29,450. I'm comfortable with that simply because as part of our Title I allocations, federal dollars, we are considered a district in need of improvement, and our schools in some cases are considered schools in need of improvement. And there are dollars attached to those. So we will utilize in our planning process those dollars to assist our elementary schools and our middle school, and that's why you see the significant reductions at those two levels. But we still will be able to do the vast majority of work that we have scheduled in the strategic plan. The other two lines are called instructional improvement services, and these are funds to support professional training at the elementary, middle school, or high school level at $500 each. That's usually when we bring in what I would call an expert or a speaker or somebody who can cover a specific topic that we feel is, first of all, in the strategic plan, and second of all, of great value to the district. The remaining $3,500 in that line is used for training in the Induction Institute. For those people in the public, that is our new teacher program. I know it seems with the layoffs that we have coming forward in that we might question why would we need new teachers. But we had similar layoffs last year, and yet we still had 9 new teachers to train and to prepare to work in the Londonderry School District.
I'm sorry, and it was 9-0?
9 total.
9.
9. The general supplies have $8,854. Those again support the Induction Institute. They purchase the books and materials that we believe as a district are our foundation that we want all teachers to have. They support action research as well as our literacy initiatives at the middle school and the high school level. The second major component of my budget is what I would call the regular ed programming. That is budgeted $77,970, or approximately 20% of the curriculum budget. $74,970 of that is for our assessment program. That's our Iowas, our Dibbles, our COGATs, the Gates McGinney. This includes all the consumables, which would be the answer sheets and new booklets that maybe are needed to replace old ones that have been worn out. And it also provides access to the various websites where we're able to analyze the specific data from those tests. That is a 5% increase in that line item, and that is mainly due to the cost of the consumables. The scoring mechanisms in that are simply going up. Also in that line item is district-wide supplies of $3,000. That includes $1,000 that we utilize for major curriculum works. To give the board an example that they would probably have heard of recently as a major curriculum initiative would be the professional learning communities, where typically we're talking bringing somewhere between 25 and 50 people to summer trainings for 2 or 3 days. And those take care of the supplies for those days. And I'm not talking about pens and pencils. I'm talking about usually there are training books and things like that that teachers take with them to utilize during the school year. We also in that line have $500 that supports the Art Annual, which is a K-12 art book that our students put together. It is annually brought to the board, and it really displays some of the talents that sometimes go unnoticed in other districts of our students. And then we have 3 line items at $500 apiece, and those support literacy at the elementary level. As we just mentioned, the high school and the middle school also have programs in that area. The third part of my curriculum budget is what I would call extended learning opportunities, which is $8,100 or 2% of the curriculum budget. The first part of that is for summer enrichments. We support that by giving $300 to purchase the supplies and materials for K-12 summer enrichment programs.
3,000.
3,000, thank you. We had just a wealth of offering last summer with, over 250 kids participating. It is a program that, for the most part, is what I would call intended to be self-sufficient, but the philosophy in our district is we have never stopped a child from attending a program simply because of the dollar amount. The summer prescription program is budgeted at $4,000. That is for our students exiting K, the kindergarten, or grades 1 to 5, who we have identified either as at risk or struggling in a content area. And that money, I would believe, is very well spent, because when you start really focusing on potential, what I would consider maybe eventually dropouts at kindergarten and grades 1 to 5, I think that really contributed to why our dropout rate is so low at the high school level of 0.25. So it's a very proactive approach, and it was either last year or the year before, we gave a presentation to the board comparing students who participated in the summer program and how they fared at the end of their next year, and we saw significant gains. So it is a program that provides us a lot for our money. We also have a transportation piece in my budget of $1,100. That goes and was traditionally put in there because we have all our fourth graders go and take a historical trip here in the town, and that covers for all those students to go. Not in my budget, but an expense that I thought was appropriate to bring up is our summer school and the salaries associated with that. The accounts, again, are not within my executive summary, but appear on pages 384 and 385. And descriptions of each of these programs can be found in the appendix in my curriculum summary. They are Appendix C through G, and they're on pages 480 to 486. The cost for running summer school, as you can see, at the kindergarten, we spend $5,432. Exiting 1 to 5, we spend $27,840. We run an accelerated math program at the middle school, and this is for students who are very good math students and who are looking to achieve at the next level, to move up a level. And it's pretty impressive when you can get a middle schooler to want to come in and go to school during the summer and take an advanced level math. So we spend $4,320. We also at the middle school have a summer school for those children who, again, might have lost a credit and need to recover that so they don't fall behind. We spend $4,320 there. We have money set aside for middle school academies for at-risk students. That goes through the entire school year. And we fund those basically on an hourly rate, and we set aside $9,000. And I'll give you an example of, again, using math. We have had an emphasis in the district on computation. And at some point, that teacher in that classroom needs to move on to the next skill. But at the same time, it's imperative that the student who didn't get that skill is able to achieve that skill. So we set up what we call academies, which run either before school or after school. They run to address a particular skill. They are intensive, and they are with a set ending and beginning time. And we have had very good success with that, and they are targeted, again, strictly at kids who we have identified. The summer school at the high school is $32,100. And again, those are for students who are trying to make up credits and graduate on time in many instances. We also have our adult and alternative education program, which is a year-round program, and that is an expense of $48,600. So our summer school is $131,522. We do have tuitions that we do charge, but again, I want to emphasize, we don't stop somebody from attending because of money. At the elementary level, we bring in $4,160. At the middle school level, we bring in $1,050. At the high school, we bring in $15,747.50. And our summer enrichment program brings in $11,328. So when we subtract the revenue from expenses, we're spending just under $100,000 for our summer school. But I think really this $100,000 does a lot to assist our children in achieving their success at the high school level. Also, as part of my responsibilities, I oversee the special curriculum department district-wide. So in my executive summary, you see that budgeted at $23,500. Conferences and travel make up $5,500. That is not for the staff. That provides funding support for our Destination Imagination teams. It provides training for the judges for those competitions, and assists the teams that reach the globals with some of those costs. Now, we have reduced that support by 50% in 2010, but those kids come to the board, they show us on a yearly basis their presentations, and it's again one of those opportunities that we as a district have decided is a priority. The gifted and talented supplies line at the elementary level is $6,000. Again, that is for all 3 schools and all the kids in the KEY program, which is more of a language arts-based program, as well as our math enrichment. One of the greatest costs in there is the testing again. The Allstat and the TOMAGs are the tests we use for entry into those programs. And the materials and the consumables and that is the driving cost of the majority of that. At the middle school, the Gifted and Talented program is $7,000. Funds are utilized to purchase books, materials, resources, and kits for in-class and pull-out enrichment activities in the areas of math and science. To give you an example, a science kit for a student who's working significantly above grade level, usually 2 years above grade level, is going to cost the district approximately $1,000. After the purchase of that kit, you're going to have, again, the consumable piece. In a lot of cases, as we joke about, bugs, to get a new shipment of crickets that come in alive, is going to cost you some money, and sometimes, those crickets don't arrive in the correct state, and you have to get a whole nother order of crickets. But it's an expensive process, but when you sit down and actually watch these kids who are tomorrow's scientists, the kids that are going to go on and hopefully do wonderful things in the area of medicine and science that will make all our lives better. And then lastly is the Gifted and Talented dues and fees, which is a district-wide fee of $5,000. It supports, again, the Destination Imagination membership for their teams, the American Math Competition, the Math Olympiad, the Thinking Cap Quiz Bowl registrations, the Geography Bee, and the Spelling Bee, and a host of other competitions. These are competitions that our children participate on a yearly basis. They do quite well. We have had very successful students go on, at the middle school level and the elementary levels and represent the district. I can say to the board that the budget I am presenting will allow us to continue to move forward with the curriculum items that are in the strategic plan. It does tighten our belts a little, but I can assure you that the teachers in this district are still going to deliver a top-notch service and curriculum to kids with the funding that's available. And I would take any questions you may have.
I'll start off real quick.
Yep.
Andy, when you speak about the summer curriculum work, and someone from the outside might say, well, you can eliminate that for a year. Can you explain to the public why that is not possible? And I think last night's discussions is part of that, the whole thing.
I'll use the initiative we discussed last night at the Curriculum Committee, which is the professional learning communities. The state standards, the national standards, but more importantly, the Londonderry standards need to be continually looked at and updated to meet the needs of our students. In order to do that, we need to bring educators together from our 3 buildings, or our middle school and our high school, to have professional discussions around the area's curriculum. Sometimes that is a result of the purchase of a new textbook series, but right now it's a result of teachers wanting to deliver the best possible services for students. And in my office, I have copies of summer work for every single thing that we paid for last year. The way it works is teachers have to put in a request of what they would like to do. They have to convince me why this is good for kids and how kids are going to have an instructional benefit next year. If they are granted the day, they then have to produce the work over that day. And that work is directly going to impact students next year. We're not having fluff discussions about something that might occur. This is the changing of lessons, the revamping of lessons. Some cases, it's training on technology, the new smart boards. It could be the student response system. And so it's really geared to each of our levels. And it's age appropriate, but it, in one sense, when I say we're going to spend $25,000, I can honestly assure the community and the board that what we're getting back is worth every single penny we're spending. And yes, we've cut that more than half, but we can do what we need to do this summer to keep ourselves running on that money because of the Dinny and city money that's available. If we were to not fund that, we would still make progress because of the people we have sitting in those classrooms across the street. They are fabulous professional educators, but at the same time, whenever we take a step back, there is a cost because those children are in front of us next year. You know, some students get lucky and take the second or third grade multiple times, but that's not the goal here in Londonderry. And to cut this funding would decrease the chances of success for students, and that's why I would have a very professional debate with you over that funding.
Thank you. John?
Andy, we can get crickets in our backyard.
We get a lot of them in here.
Hear them all the time. I mean, we have-
But if you'd like to come over and see the cricket fed to the snake, we can accomplish that too.
A quick question, seriously. On the first item, which accounts for 78% of your budget, you say $295,000 is contractual obligation. Can you speak to that obligation and what that means on an annual basis? Is that increasing? Is it flat? How does that work? And you know, is there leeway with that?
Sure. In a teacher's contract, so if you took the number of professional staff and you simply multiplied that by $1,500, you would have what I would say is our minimum obligation if they all spent $1,500. But a teacher participates in what's called a recertification cycle, where the state, in order for us to keep our license, requires us to accomplish a number of hours over a 3-year period. So we kind of have some peaks and valleys in that number because there were years when Londonderry was hiring a lot of staff together. So they tend to be on the same recertification cycle. So that number will fluctuate. The number will also fluctuate based on the number of people seeking a master's. In terms of if we had a significant number looking to get that master's, each of those people are spending the $2,250 for their course. One thing that Susie Swenson in Human Resources has done that has been a huge success and really an economic success too is the on-site master's program. Because through Riviera College, we're only paying, or the staff members paying 2/3 the cost of that graduate course. So that comes back as a huge savings for us. The other piece in it, and it goes back really to the kids, you always want the staff member who's highly trained. If you think of any profession and you were going out to purchase that service for yourself, you don't go looking for the subpar person. You don't sit there and go through the yellow page and say, okay, what attorney is just half decent? Or what accountant might, maybe I'll get audited, maybe I won't. No, you go out and maybe you go word of mouth, but you solicit the best person. And that's what the philosophy is in Londonderry. It is expensive, but to have the quality staff that we have and to do the things that we've accomplished and really do it, I would contend, in a pretty economically sensible way, there are costs. I can't honestly say if that number will go up a little or down a little, John, next year, because I don't know exactly how many people are in this cycle. I can tell you that last year the actual number was 312,000. And when you are potentially going to have a tight budget, you don't want to drastically underestimate something because it might cause you to sacrifice something else that you were really hoping to do. So that's why I increased those 2 line items.
In line with that first question, what is our retention rate for people that go through these education programs? A lot of times, especially in private industry, a company will educate a particular employee, and that employee will use that to jump to another job.
Right.
What's our retention rate, given the educational process that we have here?
We have an excellent retention rate, and I think if you just look at, I'll use our elementary schools as an example. Our district is full of people with 20 and 25 and 30 years of service. And that comes back to two things. We have a wonderful educational climate to work in, and there are always people that are willing to look to come to Londonderry for that. The second piece is we value them as professionals, and that's one of the reasons we have that contractual obligation for the ongoing professional development. But we get that back for our students. You know, when you walk through the hallways, or when your children come home and they like going to school every day. That doesn't happen in every district. That doesn't happen with every teacher. And I can't underestimate that. So I can assure you that we're not giving away a master's program and seeing people go out the door. If people leave Londonderry, it's usually to become an administrator. And if they do leave, most times it's the hope of coming back eventually. The only time where this could be non-cost effective is in a situation like this year, where we will be potentially riffing people that we have given a lot of training to. And I don't think there's any organization or company that ever wants to lose good people. But in education, it does happen.
So from the statement that you just made, it sounds that in your opinion, do you kind of look at it as stability, which improves the quality of education?
Right.
Would you say that's an accurate statement?
I think when you get a teacher, you have 3 years before you're granted a continuing contract in the district, which is taken very seriously. But that's when teachers, somewhere years 6 to 9, you really see people perfect this craft. And from there on, every year you have them in the classroom, they're going to pay great dividends. And again, because we have the climate that we have staff that are more than willing to, let's say you are new to the staff, they're going to come and assist you and help you and integrate you into the Londonderry system, because that's their belief in how they work with kids.
Just to piggyback on what Andy's saying, 65% of our staff have a master's or higher, and almost comparable number have at least our step 10 and up, and we tend to hire at the bottom end, so you can see that almost comparable percentage have at least 10 years in the school district. So when you combine the two, just to piggyback on what Andy is saying, is people tend to stay with us for an extended period of time, and the investment in the advanced degrees pays off with the fact that we have 282 people with masters or above.
John, economically, the way I look at it is when we start giving out, when we have classes of people taking masters in our school district, that's a good thing. That means there's teachers there that are probably under the 10 years on the cheaper end of the scale, because they don't have it. You're not going to get the people, most of the people that are at 15 years or 12 years in the district have it.
I view this more as an insurance marker to ensure the quality of the education throughout, as long as we're not seeing these people, leave, or we have high attrition once we educate them. That doesn't seem to be the case.
And the other thing that, I'm going to speak for Susie now, that she had mentioned several times, is this has been a selling point, having the in-district program and the master's program to bring in the quality first-year or second-year teacher that we want. That's worked out very effectively for us. It's been one of those things that's kind of thrown someone over from here instead of going to Merrimack or someplace else. They like it having the district in place. John?
A couple of questions. First off, on your handout under A, you have adult and alternative education at $48,000. Now, does that include the adult ed program run at the high school?
Yes, it does.
Okay, I had always been told that that was a self-supporting program.
Again, a number of students are able to access that program and afford that program. But again, in Londonderry, we have never denied somebody access with a financial piece.
Yeah, we also get $51,000 in an adult ed grant from the
Okay.
state to help
Right, and
to
that's-
offset the cost.
So what is the impact to the actual taxpayer of the evening and day adult ed program at the high school?
Well, to use Nate's point, if you take the $51,000 of revenue that would not be in my budget or in the salaries account, and you add that to the amount that we do bring in and generate in revenue of the $15,747, it really does become self-sufficient.
Now, on the question of the master's program, for full disclosure purposes, my wife got a master's degree while she was teaching here in Londonderry. $2,250 a year, was it? Mm-hmm. Okay, what does a master's course cost?
The contract that.
Oh, no, I understand the contract. I'm asking what it costs to take a course
Yeah,
at graduate level in a master's program.
Well, I was going to tell you how we
Oh,
arrived
I'm
at it.
sorry.
We, during negotiations, found the cost of one course at the University of New Hampshire, one 3-credit course, which is $2,250. So there are some master's degree programs, courses that are a little less than that, but we went with the University of New Hampshire for contractual purposes.
And if somebody took one course a year for a master's degree, how long would it take them to get a master's?
One course a year?
13, 14 years.
Yeah.
So it's reasonable to think that the teachers themselves are probably paying for at least one course a year at the same time?
Correct.
Okay.
I think the benefit is you get about 1.5 courses through the Riviere program.
And there is actually, in your mind, a benefit to these in-service training programs and master's programs in terms of classroom delivery?
Absolutely.
This isn't just something that the teachers' union held a gun to our heads and said, you have to give us this or we're going to go out on strike.
I can honestly say, as somebody who sat in the graduate school chair, what is being talked about, what is being discussed in classes, and there was a class last night where we had a curriculum committee, there was one of our classes is being offered. Those teachers are being trained in the latest practices in education, and they are being given strategies that are preparing them to educate students for the 21st century and to be successful in college. So I don't think they're just sitting there to get a pay raise.
Nate, when was the last time the teachers went on strike in Londonderry?
It's illegal to strike in New Hampshire.
Okay, the reason I'm asking these questions, knowing most of the answers, is I just hear so often about how teachers are in it for the money and the benefits and things like that, and the all-powerful unions forcing us to pay things that we really don't want to pay. And it turns out there's actual value to the district and the students in having some of these things done?
Absolutely, and just on that note, as Ron and John can tell you, we had a curriculum coordinating council meeting last night, and conservatively, we had 20 teachers there, and they're not getting compensated for that. They show up to discuss curriculum because it's good for kids.
Okay, that's just my little stand-up routine for the night.
Any questions? Budget Committee? John?
Andy, do we have students come from out of district to take summer programs?
We have some students, we have an agreement that I'm aware of with the Litchfield School District, but when they come in, they're covering their costs for their students.
Okay, I'm just wondering if we had unfilled chairs in a class that's going to be held anyway, whether there's an opportunity to bring in some revenue there.
I think Greg Warren at the high school does that when he can.
Okay.
And when there's accessibility. Summer schools are pretty much offered by most of our neighboring community for students who have lost credit with the intent of trying to get our students in all area schools to graduate on time.
I was just thinking, because a couple folks on the committee mentioned that, you know, people are drawn to the school system because of its good reputation, and summer school probably is no exception.
We can absolutely look at that,
Okay, thanks.
We do tuition.
yeah.
I'm watching Jay back
Yeah.
there like a bobblehead going.
Okay, great.
Any other questions from the budget? Lisa?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the special student programs like Destination Imagination. Maybe you could give us a minute or two on how those programs are going, how well the students are doing.
The district has a wealth of programs. I'll use robotics as an example, Destination Imagination, where students find their niche. When we have Destination Imagination teams come here, it always amazes me when I sit in the back and you'll see a group of 4 or 5 kids who met in the 2nd grade and now are competing as juniors and seniors, and they're going to be lifelong friends. And those parents and those kids have come together. And there is some fees in those programs, but I should have also mentioned the number of parents who volunteer. They're 1 and 2 nights a week, and as they get closer to competition, are there every night of the week, providing these opportunities for our kids. And these, again, are some of our most creative thinkers. And one of the things I think we would all agree in is that, these people who can critically think and solve problems are going to assist society in the future. And this is our way in Londonderry of supporting those children who have special talents. And I think as somebody who has only been here 7 years, I think one of our strengths is we support whatever talent a child may have. And we do everything we can through the budget to provide multiple opportunities for those children to find a place in our district. And once they find their place, they're going to achieve educational success. And I think that was affirmed for us recently when we had the NEAS committee come in. And their comments about basically that every community should have the aspects and the dedication that Londonderry had. And I'm paraphrasing. But for a lot of us in that room, it kind of gave us goosebumps because this is what we do every day. And for somebody to tell us you're getting it right is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? Budget committee again?
The audience raised their hand.
The audience, raise your hand. I thought you stretched.
Yes.
Before you go on.
Distraction.
Okay. Anything else from the board? Seeing none? Okay, Nate, anything?
Do I have it? No, sir. I'd just like to wish everybody a very nice weekend.
Reed, your turn. We're here on Tuesday.
Remember the concerts at the middle school on Saturday.
That's correct.
I'd like to make it clear that most members of the committee here, budget committee, I come here ostensibly to ask questions to the Taxpayers Association, not because I've got 8 to 10 kids that I haven't told my wife about that are in the school.
Thank
So,
you for that.
Yeah. But I, even in Washington, when I was raising my kids, I went to they didn't have a school board, they had an appointed school board, met every once in a while. Once in a while I went down to find out certain things. I'm amazed that I'm the only person here tonight, and I'm kind of worried that the word hasn't gotten out that they can ask you questions like I do.
Reed, I don't know how to get the word out that the budget committees are open, these meetings are open here for discussion. We do get emails here and there that I answer or send it on to the superintendent so we can respond to them.
Oh, wait a minute, I hear you have one of those big yellow illuminated signs we could put out.
That'd go over big.
Yes.
We know what
I
happened.
do notice that we do get more people in the audience when Nancy's here and brings cookies.
Yes.
Right?
Maybe the solution is we put a line item in for cookies, and we pack the room. I don't
Or
know.
cake. Yeah.
Or, you know, we could maybe have little classes in the back, I don't know, like.
To that
knitting
end,
or curling
Nancy
or
will
something
be
like
here
that.
next Tuesday.
All right, Nancy's here,
She's here next
cookies
Tuesday.
on Tuesday, and you're not here.
That's twice now. That's twice. The last time I wasn't here either.
Yeah,
Okay.
the last time I was, and it was 3 days after surgery. That was fun.
Thank you for letting me make
No,
the
yeah,
comment.
thank you, I just don't know how to do it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Reed, we appreciate it. Okay, seeing no, may I have a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Motion by George and second by the new